right, y'all. It's Anti-War Radio. I'm your host, Scott Horton, and I'm lucky enough that I'm joined on the phone right now by the heroic American patriot, Daniel Ellsberg. Welcome to the show, Dan. How are you?
Good to be here. Thanks.
I'm very happy to have you here, and everybody, you know Dan Ellsberg. He stole and leaked the Pentagon Papers, risking life in prison, knowingly risking life in prison to do so, and writes for truthdig.com. The book is called Secrets, a memoir of Vietnam and the Pentagon Papers. So there's this extraordinary story here, Dan, about the guy who supposedly, allegedly, stole from the government, if that's not an oxymoron, video of the collateral, what became the collateral murder video, as it was known, put out by Wikileaks. And apparently he has been arrested and has been held by the military for at least the last couple of weeks. And they're saying is responsible for turning over another very important video of a massacre, this one in Afghanistan. And although I think it's denied all around so far, the rumors are that he may have even stolen and turned over to WikiLeaks as many as 250,000 State Department cables at the highest levels of classification. So we're all anxiously awaiting your comments, sir.
Well, I must say that I rise to the word stolen that you've used there a couple of times, as is commonly done. I was often described as having stolen the Pentagon Papers from the Defense Department or the Rand Corporation. And in fact, as I got a legal education in the subject, having started as a layman and being one of the very first people ever prosecuted for allegedly stealing information, aside from leaking information, I discovered that at that time, it was very clear that you couldn't steal information. I had copied information, and in fact, although there is a copyright law, that's in almost all cases a civil law. In other words, you can sue for damages if copyrighted material has been copied or misused. The government can't copyright information, and for the very interesting reason that it's government information is seen as essentially the property of the people, who are regarded as sovereign in this peculiar constitutional system that was invented here. So there wasn't at that time any concept of stealing information at that point. Now, as the electronic media have proliferated, I understand the law has evolved in that respect, and that they can make a case for stealing information. But in this case, in any case, he was copying information and putting it out. And whether the government properly owns the information that war crimes have been committed in Iraq or Afghanistan is, I would say, a very dubious proposition. Certainly it's not a clear-cut legal proposition. So let's try to get away from the notion that he stole, actually.
Yeah, well, I think
that's information that we should have had in the first place. He copied it and didn't deprive the government. By the way, the reason, as I understand it, that you didn't have a concept of stealing information in those days, and perhaps not now, was that stealing or theft basically is depriving an owner of the use or the value of property that he or she has.
Right.
And when you copy information, you're not depriving the owner of that, of any use of it. That's certainly the case here.
Yeah, well, tell that to the music companies. But no, you're absolutely right.
You're talking about copyright there, the use of copyrighted material, and I believe that is almost entirely a matter of civil law, not criminal law.
Yeah.
You know, I'm raising that distinction because I was prosecuted, of course, under criminal charges, but that was unprecedented in my case. So again, with the music companies, they have a right to sue for the taking their property and for keep you from getting any income out of it. But that is not, as I understand it, a crime. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that. But
and the important point here, which without getting diverted off onto the music, the important question whether we're talking about taking and copying and disseminating classified government documents, or, whether that is criminal behavior or not, it is a question for the law. And as you say, even the law is not settled and clear on this. But certainly there's a moral law as well, which, at the time, I guess you're saying that technically you should have been acquitted because you weren't really guilty of the crime that they were trying to prosecute you for.
That's
or
right.
something like that.
I was not guilty of the crime that I was.
But regardless, you were a hero. And what you did was the right thing, and it was worth to you risking life in prison to do it. And you've written and told me before, your only regret was that you waited too long.
Let me make clear. I assumed wrongly at the time that I was breaking various laws.
Right.
And I was doing that deliberately. And certainly if laws were passed by Congress, which I would say violate the Constitution in various ways, but if laws were passed that made what I did illegal, I would certainly do it again if I had the opportunity under those circumstances. Right. In other words, trying to save American lives and, or in other cases, protect the Constitution by revealing government wrongdoing.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. And of course, if the court or the legislature changes the definition of property, we still know what it means, and we still know that public employees under this Constitution have no moral claim on secrecy to cover up criminal activity.
Well, I agree with you entirely. When you raise the question of morality as distinct from legality, many of your American listeners, maybe not to this program, but I've been watching the comments on Bradley Manning, the guy who allegedly gave this information out. Many of them say that what he did was immoral, whether illegal or not, that he'd promised to keep those secrets. He broke that promise. That's true, and that, of course, applies to me. I broke a promise to keep secrets. But to say that that per se makes his conduct immoral is to imply, as many people do believe, that keeping a promise to keep secrets is absolutely the highest moral priority, absolute, that you could have. Nothing contravenes that. And in this case, when it's a question of a promise to keep secrets where the secrets involve criminality, endanger other people's lives, or subvert the Constitution, I would say that a reasonable interpretation, a reasonable understanding of morality puts much higher priority on protecting the Constitution or protecting lives than it does on keeping that promise. There's a question of priority of obligations and loyalties there. And as I see it, the priority very clearly is in favor of life and of really fundamental law, the Constitution, which is violated by many of these government actions which are kept wrongfully secret.
Mm. Now, I
agree with you when you're saying that morality would point toward his putting out that information and against and even condemn as immoral the actions of those who kept the secrets. I totally agree, obviously.
Well, in fact, as long as we're on the point
many
of
Americans don't, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, well, it's too true. People conflate the law with, the highest order of morality.
The highest morality as they see it. Yeah. That's not what I would say is the fundamental basis of our constitutional system. It is in other countries. The Führer, the General Secretary, or whoever it was, the dictator, his word is law, and obeying him is the highest value. But I wouldn't say that's. I don't want to get into the argument of what's really American and who's un-American and who's patriotic or unpatriotic. I will say that the founders of our country did not have that concept. They did not embody that in the Constitution.
Right. We have our Declaration of Independence first, and then our Constitution.
And even the Constitution. And when I say that, I'm thinking in particular of the amendments which were insisted on being added to the Constitution before it could be ratified by most of the states. The original Constitution also had some very good ideas, had some bad ideas supporting slavery, but it had some good ideas, such as putting the decision of war and peace in the Congress, and that was a wonderful idea and an invention in the world, and we should get back to that, but it's a long way back, because for the last 60 years there's been a steady erosion and a drift of that authority to the president, with the acceptance of Congress, who are glad to shuck themselves of that responsibility.
Right. Now, it's funny, they say like Eskimos have 16 words for snow or whatever. In this